Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest.
Welcome back to Equine Assisted World. Today, I've got Troy Shaw from New Leaf Triangle in Leicestershire in the UK. One of the reasons I'm really excited to have him is I first met Troy, God, we're going to have to peel back through the years. It was between the Cretaceous and the Pleistocene, I think, roughly when the first mammals appeared after the dinosaurs. And when I first met Troy, he was manager at, I believe, Pepsi Cola and Walker's Crisps, but a horseman. And his better half, Lorraine, was also a horsewoman and working in a special needs school in the UK, and they made a rather sudden switch to the equine assisted field, and I was in at the birth of that, and I watched them say, yeah, we're going to do this, and I just watched them over the years create this massively successful, massively positive service in the East Midlands of the UK, really from nothing. But if you look at it now, you'd think, oh, these guys must have, come from so much money. And because it's just, you've got 2, now 3 locations. And so I think for the listeners and the viewers to really know your story, Troy, of how you and Lorraine bootstrap this thing up, I think would be really educational for a lot of us, because you came in like through the back door and made it more successful than a lot of people I know who've done it through a more orthodox way. So tell us who you are. Why did you get involved in this? And then let's go into how you've built this thing and what you do.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the history lesson as well. I've forgotten all the dinosaur stuff.
That's right. Well, back in the dim and distant, we have, yeah.
It does feel like a lifetime ago.
It does.
So I'm Troy, director at New Leaf Triangle. New Leaf Triangle started way back in 2014. So sounds like not a long time ago, but it's a long time ago. And the change from that initial start point in 2014 to where we are now is huge. It's pretty almost unrecognizable to the service we provide today.
Yeah.
So from a history perspective, really, so this is all Lorraine's, my wife's, and fellow directors' brainchild. So I'm just a pretty one, obviously, in the partnership.
Well, that's why I had you on the show.
So she was effectively a operations manager for a national charity, and she spent most of her time in the car, up and down the country from one end to the other, looking at different services that was being provided. And I think by chance she met you at one of the services she was working for or working at.
And there's a funny story there, actually, which I want to tell after this. But yeah, you go on, yeah.
Yeah, and I think if the story I've got from that one is she said she'd met this interesting guy called Rupert. He's dressed like a cowboy, and I think I was working at Walker's at the time, so PepsiCo, and she said we're going to go and meet him. And it was like, okay, where? Oh, Soho. When? Tonight. So
for those listeners who don't know what he means by Soho, so they live up in, Troy and Lorraine live up in about 2.5 hours north of London. Soho is, of course, the middle of London. So she's telling him, no, we're going to drive, 2.5, 3 hours to meet this bloke that you've never heard of. Yeah.
So I actually finished work 5 o'clock or something. I think we actually got the train in the end rather than drive. So we trundled down to Soho, sat in, I can't even what the restaurant's name is now, but I just remember being like a real whirlwind experience of like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then the train journey back was just like a head spinning moment of, oh blimey, maybe we could do something. And Lorraine was like really hooked on it, and the opportunity arose, and almost like the little nudge you need to take that leap of faith and start something for ourselves. We already had the facilities to an extent. So we had the land and the sites, but nothing like it is today. And so we had a sort of starting point and a place to start from. But that's where the initial sort of kickoff came from. So 2014, it was, right, let's go and do this, and let's go and register on Companies House. And, we're going to start a business that's predominantly working around young children with autism. That was Lorraine's background, her specialism. So she's got a master's in autism. So she's really sort of academically clued up in the area. So it seemed like the natural progression to go into that field. And it started off very, very steadily with a couple of children that came at the weekend. So, and I think one of them is one of the guys you met years and years ago. And he was a very interesting character. And we sort of just did weekend activities. All we did was every Saturday and Sunday.
Right, because you still had your day job at
I was still working at Walkers.
Yeah,
so 2014, I was still at Walkers every day. So I volunteered at the weekends.
Yeah.
You just sort of support and get involved and learn, really. So I've got no background in this. So I had to learn through hands-on experience and trying to understand the world of, Lorraine's life and her background and stuff like that. I had to learn through putting my feet on the ground and understanding it that way. So we started with a couple of students, and I was still working at Walkers. And then we had another slightly older child came during the week who was less on the autism side, but more on the social emotional side, and just needed some support in his own sort of mental health and how he worked and how he saw the world and stuff. So Lorraine worked closely with him on a one-to-one basis. I was still at Walkers again. And they were doing things just like using the environment, using the countryside, using the tools to hand to actually get involved and build things and create things, which is quite interesting because Lorraine's background is not in creating things. So she was learning at the same time. So they were building things like little brick-built goat huts, which was like, wow, from scratch. So they were both learning through, just doing it and exploring. And that was sort of fantastic. So, but it's still very, very low coverage. So we still got the students at the weekend, and then this one child that came during the week.
Mm-hmm.
And then leaping forwards a little bit, we started to work with a local college, a local special needs college, and they would send several students over a couple of times a week to use the environment, to start to explore the horses and try and build some of their own capability. And that went on for a year or so. And again, it was just Lorraine. And I think by that time we just employed somebody else on a part-time basis to support Lorraine. And then I noticed from the background that Lorraine was having a lot of fun. And I wasn't, funnily enough. I was going to work in the morning at 6 o'clock. And when we both got home at the end of the day, we were very different people in our, how's your day been? I was like, all this and the finance and all the things you get in all the corporate world, where Lorraine was like, oh, I've done this and it's been great. And I've been building this. And I'm, it's like a bit, oh, hang on a second, something's not quite right here. So in 2016, as the work for us started to increase, I took the gamble to leave my corporate job.
Which was a hell of a risk. Right?
Massive risk.
Very secure job.
Yeah.
You had a nice paycheck. You could support the work that Lorraine was doing. You pulling out of your corporate job in a funny way put that at risk. And yet you went for it. Talk to us about, did you have some gut feeling that it would really be okay? Because as you say, you didn't have a background in this. What made you take that big leap? Because you're also a dad. I mean, you've got financial commitments,
It's a real difficult one to answer, but I think it's one of those things you just work on emotions at the time. So you see how your life is going, And the corporate world where I was working was fantastic. It was a great company to work for, had all the benefits you can have, the financial benefits of a really good pension plan. So, looking at the end goal of a pension, you're thinking, oh, fantastic, I could just work up to that point.
Yeah.
But there was just that missing ingredient. I could see Lorraine was having fun. And that's something you don't normally see at work, is that ingrained fun. And you're seeing people and making a difference. Sounds like a bit of a cliche, making a difference, but you could actually physically see the
cliches are cliches because they're true.
But you very often or very seldom see that difference playing out in front of you. And so by this time we were doing things like weekend camps. So during the summer holidays, we'd got our TPs up and we were bringing families in at the weekends, and I was working more and more with students, and I was getting more and more of seeing more and more of the outcomes and being part of the outcomes, and sort of just seeing how not just individuals which had a diagnosis of some kind, the whole family were benefiting from what we were doing. So it's almost like getting hooked on it, if that makes sense.
I absolutely know what you mean, because of course it describes a lot of my own journey too, even though of course I was pulled into it because of my son. Very, very quickly I saw how fulfilling this work was. I know exactly what you mean.
And it was sort of like I think one of the trigger points for me was we had a family that came, and they had a young boy who was pre-verbal at the time, and he just wouldn't talk. His behavior was quite extreme. He wouldn't talk, and he came to us for family sessions over the summer holidays, and he camped, and really, really quickly he started talking. And he starts with a couple of words, and he starts with a few more words, and then the smiles came. He was 6 at the time. I actually saw him when he came to our 10-year anniversary last year, and he's like a grown up now, and he's so polite and he's articulate, and it's like it's a different person.
Right.
It's such an amazing thing to have been on that person's journey.
Absolutely.
And to be sort of instrumental in the start. But he was in the very early days, and we did things like back riding. So he was on the horse with me, and we'd be going around. There's some horror. He'd be coming around the arena with me. We'd be trotting around, cantering around, and he'd be giggling, and we'd be playing cowboys, and all the things I like to do anyway. So all I was doing was just playing at the same time as he was playing.
Absolutely.
And he was talking and chatting away, and and it became an addiction almost.
Yes.
So I wanted part of that, and I could see the benefit. Like I say, it's a gamble, but sometimes you can't regret what you try.
No, and you've obviously made a go of it. What did you I'm just thinking about other people who are listening now and watching, who might be thinking, well, maybe I'm in the same position Troy was. Maybe I've got a nice job. Maybe I'm feeling unfulfilled. Maybe I want to do this, or my spouse is doing this, but I don't quite know how I'm going to take that leap. Is it, fiscally responsible? I've got kids, blah, 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 blah. So obviously all of these things went through your mind. How did you make a go of it? Like, I know that there was a point where you said, sod it, I'm just going to have a go and do it. But at the same time, you would have also had a plan in the back of your mind saying, okay, I have to replace some of that security.
Yeah.
How am I going to do that?
So we were lucky when I left work, because we got a little bit of money, which we could use to effectively pay me.
Okay.
While in that transition period, while we were sort of like growing the business. So the risk was smaller, but it was still a risk, because that pot of money never sort of lasts forever.
Right. And you said goodbye to the pension at that point, I should imagine.
Yeah, the pension got frozen. That was it. So there's no pension. So there's no more golden handshake in 20 years time or 30 years time from there.
Right.
So that gone. But it's, I don't know. I think if I keep talking through this now, I'm gonna think to myself, why did I do it? Oh my God.
You could go back to Walkers, yeah.
I could have retired by now. We took the risk, and there wasn't the income to cover me on my wages
right
at that time. So I was basically paying for myself.
Yeah.
And it is a huge risk. I suppose one of the reasons why it works so well with Lorraine now, we've both got very different skill sets and different backgrounds. So Lorraine, with her real in-depth knowledge and her I don't know, expertise in the field, not just of autism, but of education itself as well. And her, I don't know, just her sheer capability in that field gave me the confidence to know that, you know what, we have got an expert here.
Right.
And then with me, with my equine background,
Yeah.
it sort of fits well. So I could take on the horse side of things and make that work and make it work safely, and also develop horses and bring them to where they need to be. Whilst Lorraine's still out there doing the, you know, the real hard work, the challenging work, which is making yourself credible with local authorities.
Right. I think that's the key of where I want to get to. And by the way, for listeners and viewers who don't know Troy's background, which I should have talked about it, Troy came out of the Household Cavalry. So, and Leicestershire, which is that area of the UK where they're operating from, which is partly where I grew up as well, is a very, very, very entrenched horse culture. It's probably one of the big horse cultures in the world, really. Jumping and cross-country riding as we know it was actually invented there in the late 18th century. It's an interesting history. So I know the background that Troy comes out of in terms of that really solid old school horseman. This is how you produce like fit, muscled horses who are good in the head, can do the job and can stand up to work over 20 years. No problem with that kind of equine well-being, they call it now. When you and I were kids, they didn't call it that. They just called it a horse that can do the job, you know. But obviously the well-being is a huge part of that. And it's interesting that you sort of brought that in. I think that that's often kind of a missing link within the equine assisted world, because a lot of people that are attracted to it don't necessarily have that same solid background that say you did coming out. But then you talked about just now, you touched on Lorraine making herself credible to local authorities. And I guess that is the beginning of talking about that financial security bit and the longevity piece. Because as a lot of people know who run these programs, if you are endlessly fundraising, and we talked about this a little bit before I hit record, you can get kind of caught in a loop of never quite having enough. Whereas if you can get to that point where you're being paid for your services properly by local authorities, then you have that stability that, say, a school or, you know, a mental health service would have, that's, you know, under government. So how did you guys engineer that credibility? What was the sort of 1, 2, 3 learning curve that you had to go through? What steps did you have to implement?
So I think that's probably the biggest thing from a credibility perspective is having the paperwork that sits in the background. So it's probably the most boring side of the business is the paperwork and the procedures and the legislation and all of those kind of things. But without those, you can't talk the same language as the people that are potentially promoting you inside.
Can you be specific? What, when you say paperwork, what do you actually mean?
Risk assessments for a start. We have a risk assessment for everything we do. So every kind of activity has its own risk assessment, and those risk assessments grow as the business grows or as the world grows, I guess, because something new will be found that now adds a need for another risk assessment. So they tend to grow with the business. But then there's also the procedural documentation, the how-tos and stuff like that, which are also as important.
Right.
So when you have those, when you get those conversations of the local authorities coming around to pay a visit, and you've got all that information to hand, they can almost sigh a bit of a relief and go, oh, thank gosh for that.
I see.
They sort of know what they're talking about.
Because what you're saying basically is the local authorities have an obligation to provide these services, but they can't provide these services unless you make it possible for them to, by speaking that language. How do you approach the services? Like, you know, because it's very interesting for me. As you know, I came up through a very different route because I was in Texas. There is no government money for anything. You know, it's just completely the Wild West. So there, we absolutely had to rely on fundraising. But of course, Horseboy Foundation and Horseboy in general became a global thing. So now I'm fascinated by how each group of people build it in their place. So yeah, I would not even know how to approach local authorities and so how does one do that?
So it's a real strange journey, to be honest. So when we first started, as you know, we did quite a lot of fundraising and we had grants and we had a lot of help to initially get the business off the ground and to help us with the facilities that were required. What we didn't get help with was things like staff wages and how we pay for the animals, how we pay for their food, vets bills,
Right.
all those things.
Capital costs, not running
Yeah.
costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and this is where that changeover period happened, where we had to support ourselves quite a lot in the early days. And it sounds almost impossible, but it's grown fairly organically.
Yeah.
So we in the initial days sort of made ourselves known by going out to local fair kind of things. So we'd have like a big open event at the Kerr Theatre in Leicester, where providers would go and talk about what they did.
Okay.
And in those early days, we had all the facilities, but we didn't have all of the students. We can do this, we can do that. You know, we have all these horses, and we can help with the mental health with people, especially on the autism side of things. But that was our offering at the time, and we've not really gone out and peddled that with local authorities. What we've done is we did those fairs in the first couple of early years, so 2015, 16, probably 17.
Right.
And as the students started to roll in, it's grown through word of mouth.
Yeah.
And not through our word of mouth, not from us going out and saying, you know, please come and do our program. This is what we provide. It's grown through our customer base.
Right, because just the service is a good service, so people thank you.
So I'll say, so local authorities.
Do they contact you? The local authorities end up contacting you?
Yeah, or schools.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
So we don't advertise, we don't chase business, we don't chase work at the moment. It's done organically through word of mouth.
So there was never a moment where you were like knocking on the doors of schools and local health authorities?
No.
Okay.
No. In the early days, like I say, we would go to these events where you'd sit in a room with other providers who were doing a similar kind of thing, but not in the outdoors and not with a horse boy method or with any kind of animal intervention or environment thoughts. It was all done, you know, we just went to these open days where we stand there for the day in front of a big flip chart with lots of pictures of the activities we'd done at the weekend. I would probably go dressed as a cowboy because it always generates interest when you go there. It
does, absolutely.
And look at you and go,
always wear those breeches.
Yeah. I always do.
Start a conversation. Yeah.
Well, let's not go down that one again. But then it generates people's interest and intrigue, and you start talking, and it's quite easy to talk about these things with a real huge degree of passion.
Yes.
And once you do that, people get hooked on it. Doesn't mean you're going to generate the income, but people will start to remember and start to think about you in their day to day and the what ifs, etc., etc.
Yes.
So that's how we sort of put ourselves out there. We didn't go knocking on people's doors. One of the things actually did change and had a big, massive credibility thing for us in the early days. I used to work with a young lad over the weekends who used to come with his mother and father, and he was really, really unconfident. You know, I can't remember how old he was at the time, but he was fairly unconfident. And what we did, we got him to a point where he came with me to a local council meeting at night and talked about what we did. And how it changed his life. And he sort of sat there, and this is a guy who's fairly unconfident, and he's sitting in front of this crowd of people all staring up at him on the platform, and he's talking about what he does. And that was like that was a proper moment.
Yeah no, it's intriguing to me because I had assumed that, having watched your progress over the last years, I'd assumed that you had a mechanism for approaching the authorities and the schools. So I'm intrigued, actually, that it was the other way around.
Yeah.
I want to back up a little bit because I said I had a funny story to tell about that night that, we met. But I think it's not just funny, it's sort of poignant because I think it also does serve as, if someone is listening to this and they're hovering about whether or not they should take the leap to do something like what you've done or what I've done. So as you know, Troy, the way it happened was I had actually been sent to have a meeting with this school in Buckinghamshire, I think it was, which was a residential school for kids with slightly, severe autism, and it had been set up by somebody who runs charities in the UK. And they said, oh, this is quite a big organization and you should go. And so they said, yeah, we'll talk to this Rupert guy. So I show up, as you say, in my cowboy boots and everything. And as I approach this huge building, because of course it's an old stately home, right? Set in parkland, and I think, oh, this is nice. Kids must be running around in nature. And of course there's not a kid in sight under the trees. And then inside it's just like a prison.
Yeah.
And then I'm sat there in the room waiting for the people to come in to talk to me. And I see down in the courtyard below the window, there's this autistic boy with a minder. And the boy is clearly miserable, crying and, let's just say expressing suffering. And the youngish minder, male, just not engaged, just impatient, concrete. And I've just come from, and I'm going to talk to these guys about horseboy method and movement method and nature, and like they're not going to be interested,
Yeah.
And so sure enough, the people come in and I give them my spiel, and I can just see their eyes going, we're not going to do this. And of course Lorraine was in the room. She was one of the people, and I couldn't read her at all. But I could read that this was not going to be a trip that was going to result in horseboy method or movement method being in this school. That was clear. And it made me very sad, because I was like, wow, you guys are going to really make the decision to just effectively do the wrong thing. And okay, you may not like me, but there's no question anymore among the neuroscientists that if you want mental health, good mental health, you got to have nature, you got to have movement, you got to have these things, you got to have compassion, so whether it's me or someone else, you're going to have to make some sort of change. But Lorraine, your wife, then pulled me aside after that meeting and said, can't talk here, can we go get a coffee? And I was like, sure. And so I had to then go take a taxi to go get a train from Aylesbury or wherever it was back into London and so we agreed to meet there. And Lorraine just said, obviously, your wife is someone who gets things done,
Yeah.
and she sort of just took me aside and said, Ru, all right, I heard it, absolutely, I want to do this, but I want to do this privately.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, how glad am I that I went to that meeting, because I can tell that you're one of those people that if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do something. That's clear. And that there's going to be a way greater reach from that than there would have been if the school had decided to implement what we did in a half-assed sort of way. And then, of course, she said, but, I need to talk to my husband. And I said, well, I'm only in England for a couple of days, and I'm meeting some of the other horseboy people in this restaurant in Soho. I mean, it's a long shot, but do you guys want to come? She goes, yes, we'll be there. I'm like, damn, you really are serious, aren't you? And then you think, well, maybe she'll show up, maybe she won't, and then we're all there in the restaurant, and then you guys show up. And I'm like, they showed up. That's impressive. And ever since then, I've just watched you do it. So, but because, as you say, Lorraine, who's this driving force and has this very good academic background, and of course, a lot of knowledge of the institutions, I assumed that she had been able to go directly to the institutions and drum up that business for you. So I'm actually very intrigued to hear that no, it wasn't done that way, that it was the opposite. It was more exactly what we did at Horseboy, with bootstrapping up and just sort of saying, here is something that works. And then people going, yeah, it does work. And then going and talking to their friends and going, this thing works. And then the authorities coming to you. I had assumed it was the other way around. So thank you. So for those listeners and viewers who maybe are hovering, just take a little bit of a page, of a leaf out of New Leaf Triangle, that both Lorraine and Troy made these kinds of instinctive, emotional, intuitive leaps, despite coming out of very secure jobs that you guys could have just stayed doing what you were doing and run your thing on at the side at weekends, right? you know, so to make that leap again, it's just so impressive.
There's always going to be a risk with everything you do, isn't there? So there's probably just as much risk as not doing it.
Yeah, but it's interesting to hear you know, I'm used to that sort of thing, I would say, because I've never had a job, right? I mean, you know, I've always been, you know, me, but so I've always been a freelancer. So that sort of insecurity, you know, I won't say I've always enjoyed it, but you know, I'm used to it. But you guys were, you know, even before you were in the corporate world, you're in the army, and in the army, they look after you, right? You know, you're not going to worry about your paycheck. You're not going to worry about, you know, things like that. You are to a large degree, you know, well, it is a corporate environment. Corporate environment is basically based on the military environment.
Yeah.
So given that you hadn't had that, you know, you were not used to being a freelancer in that way and having that insecurity. How difficult was it for you to make the adjustment?
I don't think I can't remember it being difficult at all. Because I think all of the challenges that come with making these big leaps and stuff like that were far outweighed by the fun. It almost sounds impossible. I don't want to make it sound like it's this big fairy tale world, because it's not. It's hard, but the stuff we were doing, especially in the early days, it was so much fun.
Yeah.
That you're able to forget that I might have a bill to pay tomorrow that's actually quite large, and I've got to find the money for that from somewhere.
Yeah.
Or there's a vet's bill that we've now got to try and cover, because, you know, that's what animals do. But it was all far outweighed by the positivity out of it, if that makes sense. So
I so hear you, and I think this is you know, just not talked about enough in our field. Particularly nowadays, that it's becoming like a field. You know, because 10 years ago when you and I were first sort of doing it, it wasn't a field. It was just people like you and me doing this thing. And now there's this thing called equine assisted stuff, and it's all quite serious. So you can take degrees in it now and blah, blah, blah. But that didn't. So the fun was the whole point. And I'm a great believer that if that is not there, it doesn't work.
No.
Because you're not going to fire those neurons in the brain of the service user, if you want to call it, you know, whether child or adult. The fun is the inspiration, it's the fire, it's the spark, and I think the fun is a little bit going from our field. I'm off to another conference in a few days, and I can be pretty sure that fun will not be high on the list of what's talked about. I will make sure it gets talked about, and people will probably roll their eyes. But talk to us about fun. Why does fun work? Why is fun the key here?
Because I think that the big key with fun, and the thing about fun, if it's genuine, there's no disguising it.
Yeah.
You can't hide away from the fun aspect. You can't hide away from, you can't make it up. It's not false.
Yeah.
And I know of our students and families and stuff, when they see genuine fun, it's addictive. They want in.
Right, because that's quality of life, isn't it? That's that's positive mental health is fun, right?
Yeah. So once they're in there and they're feeling that oxytocin, and you know they're getting involved, and they, especially in the early days when you'd get parents who were really wound up, wound up tight because of the stigma that sometimes their children represent, maybe in a supermarket or just in general life, when they saw that actually it's not that bad. You know, there's people here that are prepared to have a proper laugh and, you know, get involved and do some stupid things. Yeah. And they themselves could go, oh, blimey, I can actually reconnect with my children and have a laugh myself. You know, some of the real milestones is when you get a father who's, you know, oh, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to sit in the corner and get my iPhone out or do whatever and just read a book, or getting those involved and being silly. Yeah. The benefit for the whole family was just phenomenal, because you can see there's light switches gone off everywhere, and everyone's going, blowy, the child's going, that's my dad, and he's messing about, what's going on here? And then this parent will be going, hang on a minute, I've not done this for centuries. Yeah. So it's
fun, real fun is life-changing. What I mean by that is back to the idea of neurons and new neural pathways. What is fun but exploration and curiosity and looking at new, even the same situation through new eyes or a new perspective. And of course, that's going to have a knock-on effect, isn't it? That's going to mean that you can then go and look at your own situation or
Yeah.
things that you thought were closed doors and go, well, hold on, actually, no, maybe there's a way around, because this perspective I had through humor is now generalizing over to, perspectives on,
Yeah.
day-to-day stuff. Talk to us about silliness. I mean, I like that you bring this up. I mean, obviously we Brits are quite silly people. We pretend not to be, but we are. But, through the years I've known you, I love that you've got this whimsical side to you, because you were this army dude and then you were this corporate dude, but you love to dress up. You love to mess about. You have these passions that are outside of the therapeutic side. Like you've got this big thing with mounted archery, but you also love to go and ride on movie sets and play dress up and do that. And you bring that, of course, into the sessions. Talk to us about that whimsical thing. What do you think? What does that spark in the child or the family when they see you getting up in medieval gear or you?
I think it's really hard to sort of put into words, but if I get dressed up in something, I don't feel like I'm getting dressed up. I just feel like I'm putting some clothes on today, but today I am going to be.
Yes.
And
you're taking on a role, right?
Yeah. And I think it comes across as like fairly genuine.
Yes.
I'm not putting clothes on to act, and I'm not playing a role. I'm just being me, but dressed as, and it's to tell a story or to facilitate a session or just to get engagement.
I think what comes across from it when I see you do it is it would be really easy in your position, Troy, to be a kind of, I'm the authoritative, slightly macho horseman here. I think that when you dress up to make, a session happen, okay, we're going to do something medieval, so let's dress in that costume, or we're going to do something Napoleonic, let's dress in that costume. Well, A, of course, you're teaching history, but B, I think what it sparks is you make yourself vulnerable.
Yeah.
You say to the person, you can judge me if you want. You can say, oh, here's this grown man playing dress up. But you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And you're going to see why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a laugh. But that vulnerability, it takes some balls, and it takes a certain egolessness, actually.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I just remember back when I first started doing this, because I've always had a thing about dressing up right from as a child. So when I was young and I used to go for a ride on my horse, I used to dress up as a cowboy and ride around the field as a cowboy. That got me riding. So otherwise I probably wouldn't have been riding if I couldn't have done that, like a role play kind of thing, or where I saw myself being. But I remember one sort of dressed up event, I think it was a pirate. We did a pirate day. And I was so sort of engrossed in being a pirate that I actually forgot that I was dressed as a pirate walking around Tesco's. And I was just walking around. I had to go and get something. I can't remember what the event was, but I was walking around Tesco's dressed in full pirate kit. And people looking at me, I'm sort of going, what are they looking at? What's the big deal? And I was sort of so lost in that world that, it became the norm.
It's funny. I think when you do that stuff, it allows the person watching you to think, I could take on a different persona too.
Yeah.
What persona do I want to take? And it's an interesting conversation that's often been had around autism, particularly. People talk about masking as if it's always negative. And I think they're right. It's negative if you constantly have to mask because there's no choice. But it's also a very good survival skill, right?
Yeah.
To blend in. And let's say you're, I don't know, a hunter-gatherer and you want to go hunt deer. Well, it makes sense to put on a deer skin and a pair of antlers. You will get closer to the deer. And this, the shamanic side of things, you shapeshift, you take on another persona in order to get a perspective, in order to get information, in order to get, if you like, even a series of instructions to better your current situation. I would argue that the amount of dress up that you guys do at New Leaf, and I wish more people did it, is actually a shamanic exercise.
Mm.
In the same way that going to the theatre is, right? Or getting lost in story. And then story, of course, is transformation, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think when you think about masking, even in the neurotypical world, everyone does it because we'll do it depending on who we're talking to.
Yeah.
So it's a natural part of life to learn how to interact with different people based on what they expect. So it's a way of being able to flex your life skills, really.
Right, and meet people where they are.
Yeah, we just go to the extreme. So we might, it might be a cowboy or a pirate or a Dick Turpin or whatever it is that we need to dress up as. But it just shows, especially of our more quiet, reserved students, that it's okay to just do what you want, really, and go back to that word fun again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because fun is courage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you're having enough fun, you lose your fear of judgment.
Yeah.
If you're in the equine assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children, helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have Takhin equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients? Takhin equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this.
Yeah, and once that fun's engaged, you can pretty much do anything. So once you've got people laughing, you can then, all the stuff that was frightening before the fun started is now on the cards to do. Probably like horse riding is probably a really prime example. Well, I'm not going to ride a horse, but now I'm laughing, I can do that.
Yeah.
So,
And then transfers to other
Yeah.
situations in life. You have a lot of staff now. How many staff do you have?
24.
Whoa. Not every one of those people coming in probably has the natural ability for dress up, laugh, fun and story that you do. How do you bring that out of people in the staff too?
And that's one of the challenges. So you talked earlier on about the world changing slightly and the fun side and the laughter side drifting away a little bit.
Yeah.
And as the organization grows, you can sort of see it's harder and harder to get that kind of early days fun where everybody was comfortable around each other to let themselves go. So the way we do it at the moment is we'll get in there and do it ourselves. So we're the directors and all the very serious people and all that sort of stuff. But if they see me going to work one day dressed ridiculously,
yes,
it's actually okay. It's almost like it's okay to be silly.
Yes.
And one of the things we're really keen on is when we recruit people, we get the CVs, we get all of the backgrounds, all of the information, but we really need to see the person who's sat in front, and you can get a really fairly good indication of what they're going to be like just from a conversation.
Yes.
We obviously have to go through all of the legislation, the right recruitment process and all those, but the conversation still says what they're going to be like when they start work.
Right. But a young person, coming into the field, and it's, mental health, and, they feel they've got to be kind of serious. I hear that you lead from the front. You will come in to the workday dressed up and say, therefore it's all right to do. But nonetheless, when you're dealing with people, how do you draw it out of them in the sessions? How do you help them build that skill?
A lot, to be fair, in our staff, that most of them have got that there anyway. Then they've got this desire to want to make a change for people, and they'll bring the fun element in. There's always going to be the people that through life that find it a little bit more challenging to want to dress up.
Yeah.
But even when they don't dress up, they still might be sat in the back laughing.
Yeah. Okay.
And because they're still laughing, they're still taking part. They're not sitting there serious. There's not one of our staff that won't openly bawl out laughing when something's funny. They'll absolutely, be in tears sometimes.
It's so unusual. I'm just thinking about all of the. I mean, we used to sing joy with horses because horses bring joy, right? Yeah, we can agree. But when I go around looking at equine assisted things, it's not that often that people are just like on the floor, proper job, belly laughing.
No. The problem is people do it for a textbook, and a lot of the time having the expertise because you've read it and you're able to interpret what it means and how it doesn't mean necessarily that you can deliver on that text, because it is, we talk about the environment quite a lot. So there's the natural environment, nature around you, but the human environment is so much more important as well.
Yes.
If that person's happy and engaging and laughing and open and listening and all those things, that has a massive impact on how everything works.
It's so true. As you know, with the horseboy trainings, the environment's actually the thing we talk about the most, right? Get the environment right. It does 60% of your work for you. And as you very correctly pointed out, the human environment, huge part. And in fact, we generally find the human environment will, at the end of the day, top the natural environment, meaning that if you went out into a beautiful forest, but with someone who was a complete asshole and you felt threatened by, it wouldn't matter how beautiful that forest was. Your entire experience is cortisol, is stress and fear. You could be in some really pretty not nice environment, but if you're with the like super empathetic, cool, nice, funny person, it's going to override what's missing from the nature, isn't it?
Yeah, and it does. It really does work as well. So, and that's why we're so keen on getting the right people.
You say you can find out a lot from the conversation, but how do you make it safe for them in the course of like your job interviews to say, not only is it all right to be silly here, we actually quite, we'd like it if you show us you're silly.
I guess from an interview perspective, they can't sit there and like crack jokes off because they're not going to feel comfortable doing it.
No,
they're
sure, exactly.
Very insecure. But you can just sort of, just by the way people are, the way they talk, whether they're just reading from a text saying, I'm a team player and I work alone well and all that sort of stuff, that all those things go out the window.
Yeah.
And it shows with our team in the first week of them starting, whether it's for them or not.
Okay.
You can sort of say, they come into work and within the first week, you can sort of say, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And it's not, as everybody thinks, it's not based on whether it's raining or snowing or sunny or all of that's just that's out of our control.
Yes.
It's literally on how they're finding the approach. And what we've actually found is, and it's only really occurred to me just now sat here, is as the team grows, the team's becoming a little bit more self-supportive in this. So we went through a stage where we had less people, but more than the original. So we were sort of losing contact with that day-to-day stuff. And we sort of went down a gap where the team was bonding well, but they weren't necessarily bringing that fun element, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know how to lead it out themselves. But now the team's got bigger. They're starting to self-support each other now and bring it out of each other. So that there's, it's more of a community within the team, and they're all sort of helping each other to develop in the right direction.
I'd be interested. I think maybe we should plan this for some time in the coming year. I don't know how many of these things you go out to these days, but I go and speak at a lot of equine conferences of one kind or another.
Yeah.
I think we should go and do something on fun.
Yeah. Because
I just think it's being undervalued. And I think more people, wish they could, but feel they can't. And it might be really useful, I think, for somebody like you to come along and say, look, I've built this very successful, very kind of by the book service here, which does work with the local councils, the local authorities, and the local, and yet we can still be silly. One does not preclude the other.
No, I mean, fun is the underpinning of making things happen. It just unlocks that self-consciousness.
Yeah,
that
it does. It does. And if again, it just comes down to if what we're trying to really achieve here is positive mental health.
Yeah,
I don't see how that can happen without laughter, and that laughter has to be prioritized. Now, the other side of things, of course, is the equine well-being. I know that you produce very good horses. I've seen your horses. I know that they're fit well. They've got nice top lines. They've got the things we look for. Talk to us about how you produce your horses and how you maintain your horses.
So I think probably the starting point with our horses, and the one thing that I always talk about with the team, is those horses are a key member of our team. They're not horses. They're not riding school horses. They are part of the team, and we need to look after them, like any other part of the team. They're really, really important. So we treat them in that way, with that in our mind, so that their needs are met all of the time, which again, for me, is a little bit like the cavalry. So in the cavalry, the horses came first, no matter what you've been doing. You'd come off troop in the colour, for example, and you do your horses first before you went for a sit down or a cup of tea or anything like that. Your horses came first. And it's the same with ours. The horses get looked after first. So that their mental health, their well-being is in the right place. So that when they're asked to do something with a student, they're not going to go, oh, no, I don't fancy it today.
Yeah.
Or I don't feel like it. They're open to it, and they're keen and eager.
Talk to me about the nuts and bolts of the training and the maintaining, and also the living conditions. Like, give me that 1, 2, 3, because stuff that you take for granted, a lot of people do. That old school horsemanship that you come out of. It's not something one can take for granted.
And I think that's it's quite hard to put a finger on the training side of things, isn't it? So you sort of just do it organically. You just do it because that's what you do all the time.
What do you make sure that every horse has in the course of their working week, like outside of the client sessions?
They have all the horses live out.
Okay, that's
in a herd.
Okay.
So they have their natural environment, and they get a chance to socialize as a horse with the horses.
Right. And
they get all the food they need, so they're not scrabbling for food. So they're not. There's no sort of, I don't know. They never feel hungry.
Right. So they've got freedom, forage, and friends. Right.
Yeah, all the 5 freedoms. I don't
right. Whatever they are.
Yeah, never remember it. But yeah. But they get all those kind of things. So they're treated really well. And when we work with the horses with the students, they're treated with compassion. So we take things at the pace that horse will tolerate. Horses are just like people, different personalities. Some horses don't like the girth being done up. Some horses don't like the saddle going on. Some horses don't like, being interrupted while they're eating their breakfast. But as long as we understand those personalities, we can then work around them and work with them to make them work with us. And we sort of respect each individual horse as an individual horse and build the program according to that. So, for example, we talk about the archery world of things. We have got a horse that we tried archery with when we first started, and it was a real no. I'm not going to I'm never going to do that. And we tried it a couple of times, and it was quite clear that it was never going to happen.
Right.
We could have forced that. We could have made it happen. We could have got in there. We could have tried all sorts of methods and stuff, and it would have been forced. And then the horse wouldn't have been happy. He would have done the work.
Yeah.
But it would have done it from an area of resistance and never been 100% comfortable doing what it's doing.
Yeah.
So the similar with the horses when they're working with students. Some are fine with the students that are making lots of noise, jumping around, flapping their arms, and jumping off. Others don't like it. So we'll just mix the personalities. And from training them to get there, it's not really training as such. It's more observation.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just sit and we'll watch, we'll observe, we'll know, we'll understand, and we'll try and do our best to know each horse individually and what they can, because there's no point forcing things. Because if you force a horse, you're going to end up with an accident, and you're going to end up with somebody falling off in a heap.
Yeah.
You've done something that's not comfortable for either of them.
Yeah.
So we do have, going back to the paperwork side of things, we've got a huge paperwork trail with each individual horse on what they've done, where they've been, how they reacted, is there any concerns? And then we have a matrix that feeds into what they can and can't do, and who they can and can't do it with either as well, with the team.
Right. So the horse is never being put in a position where
No.
They're being forced to do something they don't want to do.
Or the team are being put in a position where they're working with a horse they're not skilled to work with, or
Yes.
the horse is not capable of working with them because of personalities, etc. So it almost sounds more complex than, well, I suppose it is quite complex, but it's through years of observation and watching.
Right. No, it's complex, but it's the functional complexity in terms of I love that you talk about matching up personality, because I see this a lot with our work too, that sometimes we might get people who are technically really quite good with horses, but for whatever reason, that they and that horse don't really jive.
Yeah.
And if I'm now going to put that person and that horse in a position with your kid, is that really a good decision?
No.
Or am I forcing those two personalities into a situation that something bad could happen?
Unless you're using that situation to try and teach something about an individual's own personality, then you can sort of really get into the nitty gritty and start to do some mirroring and things like that. But that's
right.
That's another skill.
Right, but that's still got to happen within certain safety protocols.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't do that with like horsefoy, for example, where you're back riding with a kid or something. Like, that chemistry between horse and rider's got to be there. And speaking about things like back riding, okay, so I noticed with your horses, nice top line, nice muscle, nice fitness. I don't always see that when I go to therapeutic riding places, and I tend to jump up and down about it a bit. I'm like, dudes, the horses are athletes. Yes, they are. And they're bred selectively over the last 4,000 years to be athletes. And if they don't get that outlet, they go squiffy in the head. Sometimes people take this on, sometimes they don't. What do you do to ensure the top line, the fitness and the muscling and suppling of your horses? Talk us through the sort of 1, 2, 3 of what's your baseline that you want to make sure that your team does with the horses on a week-to-week basis.
So our horses, really, keeping them fit is done by the students.
Okay.
So we don't, because we have so many students now, we don't have to do really that much intervention work.
Okay.
You keep the horses fit. One of the things we do like to do to keep the horses mentally fit is change their variety slightly. So
go on. Okay.
What we'll do is, for example, we'll take the horses to the beach, take them to the sea. So last week we took a couple of horses to the beach. It's a reward for us. It's a reward for the horses.
Right.
Or we'll take them to the forest. Or we'll take them just out for a general hack, just to change the environment. They love going out for a hack and standing on the corner, eating grass while the team just talk and have a chat. So
trail riding.
Yeah.
Right. So again, this is something you take that for granted. I can tell you, Troy, a lot of the places I go to do not do it.
Yeah.
I'm a great believer that all of my horses need, whether they're got their dressage hats on or whether they got their therapy hats on, they need tons and tons of trail riding. So obviously I try to serve my clients on the trail.
Yeah.
So I'm not battling for time, and then I'm trying to vary the trails. But I also know that, say in the UK, I'm lucky because I was in Texas, then I was in Germany, now I'm here in Spain. Trail riding is pretty easy.
Yeah.
But a lot of places in the UK, it's not. Unless you happen to have like a really good bridleway system right by you, people are often forced to hack on the lanes, on the roads. They're not safe. People drive really fast. So people often end up not trail riding their horses. Yeah. How do you get around that problem?
We're really lucky. So our local roads are quite quiet.
Okay.
We've got a very good loop, which takes about an hour to ride round, where it's safe to take the students.
Okay.
For a ride out, for a trail ride hack. Our limitation there is all about the time that the students got with us. So we can't go out for a day because the students got to go to their next place, or they've got on their agenda that they might be with us to do a course like an animal care course. So they have to go and fulfill that part of their sort of time with us. So we are lucky that we have got those roads that are quiet, and they do have those grass verges.
But you are having to ride along the roads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. In Leicestershire, you have those big grass verges along the sides of the roads.
Yeah, they can be a blessing and a bit of a curse in both sort of terms, because the roads can be a bit quick when they're a bit open. So people tend not to be looking ahead and thinking, but also they can be nice and relaxing. But like I said, where we are, we're very lucky to have this sort of area to ride around where it's reasonably safe.
And you take your students out on your clients out on the trail.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's more of a summer thing, because in the winter it's too dark and too dingy. And nobody really wants to do it anyway. But it's in the summer, it's fantastic.
Which means that you got to be also pretty confident in the bomb proofing of your horses. So if the fire engine comes around the corner, your client's not going to get dumped or hurt. Talk to us about that. How do you bomb proof them?
Just by exposure, really, more than anything else. So you're never going to know what a horse is going to do until you put it in that situation to see what he does.
Yeah.
And we've had horses come to us that, it can't go past tractors, or it's terrified of tractors. Reality is, it's the rider that's terrified of the tractors and not the horse.
Yeah.
Once you put somebody who's fairly confident in there, you can start to get the horse on side and get it used to the environment. The environment's always going to be there. You can't take the environment away.
Right.
They just need that exposure and how they manage themselves in those conditions.
Indeed, but you can't do the exposure by being out there with a kid.
Like, we'll do it ourselves. We'll go out back. So one of the big paybacks for the team is this ability to take advantage of the horses to an extent and go out for a hack. After work in the summer, we'll go out as a group and go, right, let's go for a hack. And this is where we can go a little bit more onto the bridle paths, through some rivers, that kind of stuff, and start to have a bit more fun, and it gives the horses that mental break. But you can also give the horses a bit more exposure to stuff that you can't necessarily get with the students.
Absolutely.
One of the things we do is we have very clear procedures on what if. So what happens if the big scary tractor comes down the road? What are you going to do? Because we do have horses that have had a history that they've looked and spooked at tractors. So we have a program. We'll know exactly what we're going to do, and whether we take the child off or take it to a gateway or stand flapping our arms in front of the tractor to make it stop. With the we'll have something that actually we follow to make it work and make it work for everybody.
What I love about that, though, is you don't take the easy option of saying, well, we just won't go out in case it's a tractor.
No.
Because one of the things I like about that is, if we're in the business of also trying to help people deal with the world, which is our job, right?
Yeah.
Then if we aren't that way with our horses, how are we going to transfer it to the people? And if one thing I love about horses is because they carry you through situations. So I might be afraid of going up that hill, or I might be not fit enough to go up that hill, or the horse can carry me, or I can't understand cognitively yet how to play a game, but the horse can carry me through a game. And then as my neuroplasticity develops, eventually cognitively, I will be there, but the horse can really help me. But, frequently people, in the interest of safety, will often dumb it down to the point that there is no exploration. There is no risk. Now, I know that, a certain number of listeners and viewers are going to go, risk, you can't have risk. But I feel that you have to, because you can't actually get away from risk.
No.
So one can think one is controlling the environment to get away from risk, but you and I both know that sooner or later, something is going to happen, like outside of your control. They're going to land a helicopter in that field next to your arena that you never leave, or something. Yeah. And despite all your best efforts, your horse is going to totally freak out. So rather have them exposed to helicopters. Do you also take them through like sound bomb proofing, tarpaulins, that sort of thing as well?
We will put obstacles in the menage, like tarpaulins on the floor.
Right.
And then because they all live in the local area to the menage, around the fields, around the outside of it, if we're doing a session in there which requires lots of noise and stuff, they're watching it.
Right.
They're in the environment. They're not being forced in the environment. They're actually sat watching it from the safety of their own field. So they're
they can observe it.
Yeah. Learning through osmosis, learning through their friends. We'll do silly things like if we're trying to get horses used to flags, we'll put a flag over the water trough. They're going to want to drink. They'll have to find a way of getting them manage their own sort of fear to get through that.
Right.
And it's interesting how you talked about the risk level. The thing about risk is the other side of risk is achievement. So once you've got through that risk, you've actually achieved something.
Yeah.
If you
self-esteem. Yeah.
Yeah. It might be jumping over a small crosspole.
Yeah.
There's a hell of a lot of risk in jumping, especially for a new rider.
Yeah.
But the achievement, once they've done it, far outweighs that risk. As long as the work's been done in the background.
Yeah.
And, you've taken all the precautions which you need to leading up without being dramatic about it.
It's about preparation, as you say. And maybe I think your military background helps with that because, or maneuvers and operations.
Yeah, possibly.
You're putting people in risky situations, but you want to bring them all back in alive.
Yeah.
But also get, so there must be a certain amount of that training that rubbed off on you to think about how do I prepare from the ground up so that when we do have that situation with the risk, we know that the horse and the human are as prepared as they can be.
Yeah, and you've also, you've done all your pre-work, you've done as much background work as you possibly can, but there comes a time when you've almost got to say, you know what, let's just go for it.
Yeah.
Otherwise it becomes like you'll never do anything because, you just won't actually put that risk in the way.
Yeah.
And then there comes a point where you say, well, actually, I better not ride in the menage in case the pheasants fly out today because they might fly, that's a bigger risk. Or you and it's like, I think you see that in society as a whole now, your risk just gets in the way of everything. And people tend to do the less risky thing of sitting at home and look at the phones.
Exactly. No, exactly. Which of course is a whole other set of risks.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking back to when we were in Texas, we had everyone and their dog had guns, right? So there would be so much firearms activity going on. And then my neighbor, Robert, now I'm vet, would build his own artillery grade ordnance and set it off in his front field, which was on the other side of the woods from our arena. And I'd be in there with a kid and there'd be an explosion, which you'd feel like in your bones.
Yeah.
And even though it's happening, 500 meters away, and I'm like, what am I going to do? So I thought, well, I can't tell Robert he can't set off bombs in his field because this is Texas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Robert if I can graze my horses in the field where he sets his bombs off.
Yeah.
And a couple of my friends from Europe were like, well, you can't do that because your horses will freak out. And so, well, they will initially, but I bet you after 2 days, they won't give a toss. And then I will know that I am safe when he randomly does that thing. I have no control. He's not going to call me and tell me, he's just going to do it. And then it was the same with my other neighbors. They would just come and start, setting off automatic fire, but often like really close to where we were. And we just had to get the horses okay with it. And so then we took it a stage further and I would think, okay, well, why don't we go down to the fire station with our horses and slowly bomb-proof them to the fire truck there? And why don't we go to the supermarket? And why don't we go to the car wash? And why don't we? So we actually started making a big point about all of that. And then, of course, we started including our students and our clients in those fun sessions. Then we realized, oh my gosh, all of this thing, which normally was taking time out from, and it's like a time conflict. When are we going to get the time to bomb-proof the horses? Like, no, hold on. We can do that with the students, provided, you're not going to do anything too crazy. They can be part of it. Yeah.
We had a really good example last year. So we take our students to a big BHS event, a big dressage show jumping event over at a place called Pickering Grange in Leicestershire. And it's a really big, significant thing for the students to go out to a dressage, get dressed up in all the all of the requirements of a dressage test. And this year when we went, it was a really windy day. I mean, really windy. And there's doing the dressage tests, but nobody thought that the dressage boards might blow. So one our students riding around doing the nice dressage tests, and all of a sudden these like big plastic dressage test boards just lifted off the ground into the air. They must have been the height of the student riding the horse.
Wow.
In normal circumstances, horses would have just completely freaked on that. But our horses tend to be able to accept something changing, something different, and they manage themselves. We can't
better than the average sport horse would. Yes.
we can't manage the horse's emotions for themselves. We can't sit on the horse's back and say, no, you're all right, because they won't listen.
Yeah.
They have to be able to manage it themselves, and be able to go, right, rationally, what am I going to do now? My brain's telling me to run away.
Yeah.
I'll get rid of this rider now and I'll be off into the sunset because I'll be safe then. But they seem to just manage themselves to the point where they can go, like we would, take a deep breath, let's think logically, which doesn't sound right with a horse, but actually it does work.
Yeah.
And that's what we try and get to.
Well, it's interesting you say that. And again, I think that the cavalry background, the hunting background, all of these things bring us into these situations. I grew up very much in the hunt world, and you just never know what you're going to encounter out hunting. It could be anything. And your horse kind of, after a while, becomes kind of okay with everything.
Yeah.
Through slow exposure, as you say, and sometimes strategic exposures, before you might meet something. But I love the fact that you have that example of, going to that show, that happening. I would posit that probably some of the dressage horses probably freaked out a lot more than your horses did, because the sport rider wouldn't necessarily feel the need to create that safety in a horse, because they're not dealing with the risks that you're dealing with the riders.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things as well is to exposing the horses is one thing, but it's also exposing the team to these situations. So you can expose the horses yourself till the cows come home, but if you're riding them, you're the person who is effectively with them while you're exposing them.
Yes.
If you don't get the rest of the team in those circumstances, they might be a dressage rider that's all they do is dressage. So anything different is, a horror.
Yeah.
If they don't ride through those, they're not going to learn that actually it is okay to ride in the wind. Or it's okay to ride, in these circumstances. Or
right. Or if
the
a pheasant gets up in front of you, it's not the end of the world.
So you've got to build it's almost like building the team's responsibility and reactions as well as the horses.
It's true, because it's the humans involved also are not freaking out when the tractor comes, or then the horse is going to take their cues from the humans.
Because I mean, I always tell everybody's right that one of the things to remember is you've got time. It doesn't feel like you've got time, but you can take a couple of seconds to have a think about what you're going to do. This is the circumstances. This is what I'm going to do, and you can just think rationally, and it helps you just have a bit of a head start.
I'm thinking back to, this is where back to where we're talking about fun and silliness. I think that when you've got that kind of culture in your barn, then there's also kind of a base underlying message that's always there for the horses and the humans, saying it's always all right. It's always going to be all right.
Yeah.
And most situations will be fun, actually. So what that I think breeds is a certain faith. The horses have faith in the humans have faith in the horses. Give me some examples. We touched on the dress up and the silliness. Can you give me some examples, some stories that stand out in your mind about breakthroughs that happened in the course of those silly dress up sessions, and why and also what's the pattern of the dress up sessions, the historical ones, the pirate ones? When do you do them? Why do you do them? What makes you choose, okay, today's a medieval day, tomorrow's a pirate day? Like what's the rationale going on with all that? And then give us some examples of changes you've seen in those moments.
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there.
I think the dress-up days sometimes just work on how you feel in the morning, or depends on what student you're working with.
So you might just do that spontaneously.
Yeah. I've got a pretty horror story for one of our new starters. So we had a lady. This is going back probably 6-7 years ago. It was her first day at work, and I was working with a particular student, and I decided this week was going to be Scottish week.
Okay.
So I dressed up in a kilt. It wasn't a kilt; it was a blanket that looked like a kilt. I wrapped it around my legs, but it actually looked like a mini skirt. And it sounds horrific now when you think about it, but I had a drum, and I was marching around the yard playing a drum in this mini skirt, which I had trousers underneath it, talking Scottish, and just to try and get this student to engage. It worked really well, but the poor new starter staff was like, "What have I let myself into?" But it sort of, the dressing up doesn't really. Sometimes in fact, sometimes when you plan it, it doesn't work as well as it does when it's spontaneous.
So you'll do it sort of you just wake up in the morning, you say, you know what, I fancy today's Pirate Day. And okay.
Yeah. Well,
And so you won't necessarily call all your staff and say, okay, lads, today's Pirate Day. You'll just show up as a pirate, or will you send out a bunch of texts and say,
it's quite interesting. So when we most of the dress up takes place now over the holiday period. So we'll say that the theme for this week for the holiday sessions is, I don't know, we're going to be pirates or we're going to be cowboys. And the problem with that, because you're reliant on the confidence of the individuals, it can sometimes not work as well because they won't come in fully committed to it.
right, a bit like kind of forced fun.
Yeah, you have to be like, go back to the authenticity of it. If you do it half cocked, across a lot worse than if you didn't do it at all. So it's something that's better done if it's less spontaneous, more spontaneous, and people get involved through actually, I don't know, I'll get dressed up. There's a books and stuff there. Put it on if you want to. That kind of, rather than be a force kind of thing.
But will you do it like weekly? Will you do it monthly? Will like months go by and you don't do it? Or
we could go months without doing any kind of dress up. Or I mean, this time of year is perfect. Got Halloween and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, today I've been up the field this morning, and half the students have come in dressed as skeletons and wizards and all sorts. So it's great. It's like, okay, they really embrace the dressing up. So that was really good.
And then in terms of the silliness, like for example, Henrik and Gitti Berkhoff, who run that amazing place, Horseboy place in Germany.
Yeah.
They have all these really cool mechanisms for silliness. Like they do these pillow fights on horses. And then Gitti has these toilet brushes where she uses them as like microphones in an interview. And then she gets the kids to also go dip them in a bucket and then go and chuck the water from the toilet brush at their parents. And stuff. And then they have like a toilet that sits in a sand pit, and they pretend to use the toilet like in front of the kids. And of course, this actually often does end up being a breakthrough for toilet training, but they're prepared to make themselves very silly. Do you have some, specific strategies like that? Or some go-tos? Yeah.
It's more of an underpinning rather than a strategy, I think, because once you've got that approach in your mind, you'll use it throughout the session. So our sessions are it's education based. So most of the students that come to us are here for either taking away a qualification like a sitting guilds in horse care, open awards, maths and English, that kind of stuff. So there is a tangible outcome from it, but no one can prescribe how you get that tangible outcome. So the underpinning part could be, you might say, I don't know, I'm going to do some maths today. I'm going to dress up as Dick Turpin because we can talk about how long it takes to get from London to York and the reality of it and all that sort of stuff. So you can use those to actually get what you want out of it. It's
right, almost like a distraction to say, don't be afraid of the maths. Actually, we're going to talk about highwaymen. And in the course of talking about highwaymen, we're going to talk about distance, and in distance, we're going to talk about numbers. Right.
Yeah. Or somebody won't write or read. You can give a bit of paper and they can make a poster. Yeah. But they're now writing and reading because they've got to do the poster, but they're not doing it because they've been told to go write and read. They're doing it because it's part of the fun.
Absolutely.
We'll catch Dick Turpin if we put a poster around the woods.
Right.
So it's hard to describe. We don't go out with the intention of doing it, but it actually becomes part of how we plan and move into the session to get the best outcomes.
It's so true. And I use this type of distraction all the time. I'm just thinking about, we often do a thing called crazy time with our horses. So I like my horses to be able to go a bit nuts sometimes and free jump usually in a group. And I'll involve my students with that. And so let's say we want to do some math. I'm not going to say we're doing maths. I'm going to say, let's give some crazy time to the horses. They'll enjoy it. And you'll enjoy moving the horses as they do it. But while we're doing it, I wonder how long that long side of the arena is. Let's walk it. How many
Yeah.
paces is it? And then we can time with a stopwatch. How long does it take for the horses to go that distance? And then on my cell phone, I could do distance over time and get speed, or there can be the heights of the jumps and the distances. And then there's the team building of setting up that course. But I want a math outcome, but I'm going to use something else to get that math outcome, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
sounds like you're coming from a very similar place there.
Yeah, it's all about how you get the outcome, isn't it? How you actually get the engagement.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why a lot of the children struggle, especially the quieter ones, is they need something to stimulate them to get the engagement.
Well, I guess what we're talking about here is play, right?
Yeah.
And all the neuroscientists now agree that play is learning and learning is play, and the most effective learning is always play.
Yeah.
Right.
But if I go back to my days in the corporate world, some of the times that you probably had the best team outputs is when you went on a team day.
Yeah.
And you did things which are away from your desk, and you were physically active, and you'd make something, or you'd be silly.
Yeah.
People would talk about those for a lot longer than they would do, how they got to the financial year end and all that sort of stuff. So it became really important.
No, it's so true. And this to show people that you can enjoy life and that you should enjoy life, particularly people who are coming out of, some depression and that sort of thing. To be around joy.
Yeah. I think it's really important to pick, and it's quite easy to get to a point where you forget how to laugh.
No kidding.
Or when to laugh, or
or that is it even safe to laugh?
Yeah, but especially nowadays, you're not sure whether what the triggers are. Should you laugh? Shouldn't you laugh? And it's quite hard.
Yeah. No, it is. I'm thinking back to when I had to teach Rowan, my son, to drive. He was 16. I'm going to teach my autistic son to drive, and I'm going to teach him to drive on the roads of Texas. Terrifying.
Yeah.
And I was terrified. He was terrified, but he was adamant he wanted to do it. And so we sat there, and I said to him, how are we going to make this unstressful? Because I'm not going to lie, I'm totally stressing it. And he said, do it in an Indian accent.
Right. Yeah.
Genius.
Yeah.
It just made the whole thing hilarious. Now, someone today might come, I mean, it is still today, but when he was 16, that's what, 5-6 years ago. But the advance of, savage political correctness to the point now that someone might say, you can't do that, Rupert, because that's, racist, or that's, it's like, no, it's not. That's not where it's coming from. And by the way, you're very welcome to make fun of my accent.
Yeah.
If that's going to help teach some autistic to drive, absolutely take the piss out of me.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a disrespect. It wasn't a piss take. What it was a distraction and using it for comedic effect. But we could have used a Yorkshire accent, or we could have used a posh accent, or we could have used anything.
Yeah.
A French accent. But as you say, these things are becoming harder and harder, because now I think our reaction might be, oh, am I allowed to do that? Is that safe? Will I get in trouble if I do that? And then so maybe I won't do that. And then suddenly that opportunity is lost. It's interesting how there's now an assumption that any sort of stereotyping is negative, when of course our entire society is always stereotyping constantly. Because how can we not? Because we have to generalize, right? Not everything can be specific.
Well, that's what advertising is.
It's always disrespectful. Yeah.
And if in the media, that's how you advertise, isn't it? You have to stereotype to get you to better do sales.
I mean, one has to stereotype even to the point of saying, for example, let's say I say Troy is a rider. He's a horse guy. Well, that's a stereotype.
Yeah.
You might say to me, well, no, Rupert, there's a lot more to me than that. And I'd say, well, I'm sure there is. But I also know that you spend a big chunk of your day riding horses. So therefore, I'm going to say that you're a rider. But that's meaning no disrespect to you. That's just sort of acknowledging that is your predominant culture, right? I mean, surely that's all right.
And I think it'll eventually come full circle, because I think people have realised that we're actually making life so hard for ourselves by being overly critical.
Yeah.
And in fact, the most critical people out there are yourself. You tend to second guess yourself a little bit too much, and then once you start second guessing yourself,
Yeah, that's true.
you then start going, well, I better not do that, or I better not say that, and then you start to go down the reading from text, and you lose the ability to connect through feeling and nature, and doing everything through, I don't know, sincerity, I suppose.
It's authenticity.
Mm.
No, I so agree. And nature doesn't care.
No, horses
about
don't care.
Human ideas, like what's appropriate. Nature just is, right?
Yes.
And we have to prepare people for quote unquote the real world. So if they don't encounter humor, silliness, piss take, irony.
I think the scary thing is the real world is horrendous for some of these students, especially some of ours. What the things they are exposed to, the especially through things like social media now, where they're almost like not, well, I suppose they are bullied through social media. They're put pressure on through having this, having that, and not having this, not having that. It's so difficult to know how they cope.
No, I agree, and I think what you're putting I'm just thinking, I was in Michigan last week, and I was with the child of a dear friend of mine, and I've noticed in this generation, of course, that's us a couple of old blokes who go, "Whoa, when I was a lad,
my day,
you had it, you got it easy when I was a lad. Lived in Upton shoebox at Bockmont Reservoir." But the truth is, I do think there has been an erosion of resilience, and by trying to make things for good intentions, wrapped in bubble wrap, while at the same time the world just gets more and more savage out there in weird ways, because social media goes right to your brain, right? It's not like it's just something over there with a physical bully that maybe you can avoid or ignore. It's going to invade your life in a really insidious way. And I do think that the current young adult generation is proportionally less resilient than the generations that have gone before them. And your job, particularly with the silliness and the perspective that brings, what you're saying, I think, is learn to be resilient, right? That is resilience training in a weird way.
Yeah, and also learn to laugh, and it's okay to laugh, and it's okay to have fun, and and
right, because that is resilience, right? You can go to a shit situation and laugh about it.
Yeah, and you go back to the going out on trail rides. One of the things which we really get the students to do is, when a car goes past and they slow down, is put that big smile on your face and wave.
Yeah,
because then you've got a different outlook on the world, haven't you? Once somebody smiles, and it tells you a little bit more about them than it does when they just give you that sort of like death stare that everyone's got nowadays. So smiling and waving and being grateful, actually, it teaches them so much just from
gratitude.
Just hack out.
Yeah, no, absolutely, gratitude, and kiss your horse.
Yeah,
love your horse, make much of your horse. Yeah, thank your horse.
Yeah, it's like a primeval thing, isn't it? But we sort of lose it a little bit because we get stuck in it. We are in a very technology-driven world, aren't we? Where instinct has been taken away, or at least we're not allowed to use instinct or act on instinct as much now. We have to always go through procedures and policies and all those, and then by the time you've gone, you've lost the situation, you've lost the moment, and if you don't act on it at the time, you sort of you've just missed out a little bit.
I hope you're right about it coming full circle, because I feel that there's a kind of been a tyranny in the last decade or so, where it's reached a point of, well, I think we're starting to see the casualties of that in a younger generation that is not as resilient. And as you say, if you can't laugh, if you can't be grateful, if you can't, then again, you just don't have the resilience to deal with bad situations.
And again, it comes back down to that play.
Play.
And not just playing with Lego, it's the physical movement play, the imagination games, the ones where they set their own boundaries and rules, and you'll go out and you'll get a group of friends together and you use your imagination to create a world which you're immersed in for however long you're allowed out to play. You know, I think
Right, rather than diving into a computer game where
Yeah.
it's all done for you,
yeah, then you
and
become
you
a
don't have to
character.
create anything. Yeah,
No, and there's no. It sounds quite harsh, but in a computer game, there's no reality when you fall over. You don't learn anything from it. When you're out with your friends and you fall over, you graze your knee and you've got like a battle scar and you've got like a bit of a cut and it hurts. And you remember then that
Yes,
actually, if I
you
do
do.
that, that's going to hurt.
yeah,
I won't do that next time.
yeah.
And you build,
Or what is a more skillful way
yeah,
to jump over that thing
yeah,
or whatever?
yeah.
Yeah,
So you build resilience, and then you'll start to build more ability to change things
yes, yeah.
and
Skills.
learn and stuff. And it's, you know, it's not rocket science, but it feels like it is sometimes, that it's been moved away.
Well, it used to be. It used to be. I think that imagination was built in
Yeah,
because most of us did not have immediate access to the stuff we wanted, right?
No.
So we had to imagine it.
Yeah.
And maybe if we imagined it enough, we might eventually manifest it, but that wouldn't prevent us from having fun along the way.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm thinking back to a little girl who was from South Korea that used to come to us in Germany. She would, her parents were expats, and she was in love with horses, so she would come and ride with us. And she was having to move back to Korea, and she knew she was going to go back to the city, and that horses were not going to be really available. And she was grief stricken about this. She was only 8 years old, and I was thinking, how do I help?
Yeah.
What do I do? This is hurting. I can see how much this is hurting her. And so we went through these exercises when I would just take her trail riding in the forest, and we would do imagination exercises where, like, okay, you're in your room in your apartment in Seoul, and I want you to be able to project yourself from there to this trail ride in this forest. So what's going on? Like, what are the smells?
Yeah.
What are the different greens? What are the rhythm of the footfall of the horse underneath you? Like, when you touch the horse, is the coat a bit dusty, or is the coat quite slick because of the time of year? Is there mud? What birds are there? What noises are there? And it really made me focus on this and try to think about this, because I knew she was going to go back to a situation where resilience would be required and suffering would be intense.
Yeah.
How can I project into the future something with this horse experience now? And I think what you're doing with all that play and all that dress up and the key is imagination. What you're saying is you can imagine a different reality. You can imagine your own reality.
Yeah.
What reality do you want to imagine? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a case of just going with the flow a little bit as well, and just seeing where it takes you, and not being, as the person who's sort of leading the session, is not being fearful, I suppose, and just sort of going with it and just letting it grow, and not being, if it changes, and you just go in a different direction.
Yeah,
and
not being attached to any one outcome.
Yeah, and you using what you've got, because you still might have a, like most things, you've got today you must learn your 10 times table or something like that, but no one can prescribe how you get there, and you've got to use what's in front of you at the time. So whatever you're presented with on that student or child on that day, that's what you've got to work with.
Yeah.
And that might mean you have to dress up. That might mean you have to be really silly.
Yeah.
Or it might mean you've got to be really quiet and just sit down and, just sit in the safe space.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not, but you can't force it.
I think when you say sometimes you have to sit down and be quiet in a safe space, it's also true. Like, I found myself in situations sometimes with a student who wants to do something that I don't much care for, like really talk about Minecraft,
Yeah.
And I've got to, be able to fake enough of an interest in Minecraft and create games around Minecraft, even though that's a real stretch for me.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's even personality clashes between you and the student, but that's not the student's problem. And so it's funny, I find one can use imagination in that way, and environment. Like, I had this student a couple of years ago, and it's no fault of theirs, but I would be almost dreading the session.
Yeah.
And but I'm like, but that's not their problem. I still need to serve them. How do I make sure that I'm in my best place? So I thought, okay, I'm going to select my environment. There's a stream down below the stables. I love being there.
Yeah.
Let's go there. And I bet you this person's going to get really into it as well. And at least I'll be able to enjoy there and daydream there a little bit.
Yeah.
And then maybe together we'll, you know.
That goes back to that human environment again, doesn't it? So
It does.
if you're human, how you're feeling, or at least how you help yourself feel in the right way is manageable, then you can get so much more out of it.
Yes, it is.
So I mean,
Yes, it is. And it allows you to access your empathy.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, we used to have a student a few years ago who had been everywhere across the country, you know, in different places where he's profoundly deaf, couldn't hear anything, had to have an interpreter all the time. Even when he came to us, had to have an interpreter. But he'd been across the country, and it turns out that the only reason he was acting how he was is because nobody'd listened to him.
Right.
Because his way of communicating, he obviously couldn't talk because he couldn't hear himself.
Yeah.
He was conscious about his predicament and stuff like that. But at the same time, he wanted people to listen, but nobody would listen. They'd just, you know, basically shuffling around here, there, and everywhere. And he came to us, and he was probably one of the best students I've worked with. Really, really challenging because you had to have an interpreter, but we used the interpreter for our own advantage to create fun.
Okay.
So, for example, when we used to have, because you have to have regular catch-ups with the authorities and the people that are the experts, and he taught me swear words in sign language.
Brilliant.
So we both sit there in these meetings, and we've been doing these really, really naughty sign languages to each other, just to make, because he found these meetings really hard work because he knew it was all about him. He didn't know what to say. He knew no one was listening.
Yeah.
And we'd sit there and we'd sort of team up. So the meeting would go really quick. And I think I'll share this one story. Because we had an interpreter, we drummed up the idea of going to Rutland Water.
Okay.
And doing
Rutland Water being a big lake in your area.
in Leicestershire, which it's got a lot of outdoor pursuits and stuff like that. And we decided to go stand up kayaking.
Okay.
Which it was, I still picture it now. There's the three of us on individual boards, and we got this. We got him to stay. He's a big guy. We got him to stand up on the board, and you know, it was really funny. We're all falling in, but of course, the poor interpreters got to stand on the board and try and interpret while we're having this laugh.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It was just hilarious because he was, I know, it's uncontrollable laughter because he knew what was going on, and you know, and he was out his comfort zone because he didn't like water, but he's in the middle of the water on a board, and it was just so brilliant, and he changed so much and grew confident, and you know.
I love the fact too that you will do things that are outside of the equine. You know, this is one of the hardest things I find in trainings that I do, is to say, look, in our job, you've got to be obsessive about your horse training and preparation, and willing to abandon that in like 10 seconds if that's not where the person's at, and go do something else. And of course, horse people are so horse focused and narrow-minded that way often that they can't think outside of the horse. And you know, earlier in this conversation when you were saying, you know, Lorraine was coming back in those early days saying, oh, I've been building these, you know, goat houses out of bricks, you know. Someone might say, well, that's not equine assisted work, you know, but it's nature and the mind.
Yeah.
And equine stuff is only one aspect of nature and the mind, right? How do you, when you're training up your teams, get them, because most of them are probably coming because they're pretty horsey. How do you get them to think with that type of flexibility, to think beyond the horse?
It's quite interesting that, because a lot of our people that come aren't horsey at all.
Okay.
We're actually at the moment struggling to get horsey people.
Oh, is it more the other way around?
It's a bit of both. So we went through it's right. When you get the horsey people come in, they're very much right. I've done dressage, and this is the way you do it, and you know, let's get the horses winched in, and you know, they've got to be in an outline, and they tend to be one of the hardest people to work with.
Yeah,
because they are very structured in their approach, and they tend to be less open to being silly and that kind of thing. So I'd say probably 60% of our staff aren't horsey at all.
Okay.
but they get the concept of the importance of movement and the
Yeah.
importance of play. And when we have to do regular training because that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
But the training has to, we don't just do training for the sake of doing training. We'll do training because it actually adds value. So we recently we went back through the science behind the horseboy method. So
Just scratching that little ghost in the background is my younger son, Kirian. Hello.
hello.
Sorry. So the science behind the horseboy method, go on.
Yeah, so we drew out the models, for the personas and all that sort of stuff, and we got people to act it out. So everybody had a part. Someone was a neuro and they're firing up to the head, and by the end of it, they were just like in stitches.
Yeah.
And we used that point there to then go away and they had to create an activity to deliver to students. And I gave them all an envelope. Here's an envelope. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. But you had to use only the stuff that's in the menage to do that.
Yeah.
So you had to be really creative with it. So we try and do the training to make it as creative as possible and less, sat down talking.
Right. So that people can make that jump in the moment.
Yeah.
Of, oh, I see the kid. I thought we were going to do this, but actually we have to do this. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'm going to use this to do the same thing. So, I might be go back to my maths. You might use some sticks you found in the woods to work out percentages or something like that. So
yes.
It's just thinking on the feet, but at the same time as while they're doing it, they've got to be immersed in themselves. They've got to almost see that kind of end goal, but have so much fun getting there, and they forget they're doing it as well. So if you can get your staff or your team to do their sessions and they've had such a good day that they've forgotten they've done it.
Yeah.
Because it's been so, if you look at your watch going, oh, bloody hell, I've got another hour left now. Oh, I'm still another hour. That's never going to work.
No.
It's almost the opposite. Oh, I've only got an hour left now. Oh, crap, I'm going to get this done.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we try and get the whole team doing. And our team are really, really good at it.
Well, you made a massive success of it. You've got now 2 locations and a third one coming up.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit, because we're sort of approaching the 2-hour mark, and we should probably wrap up. And people, I think, will want to know where they can check you out and how they check you out. Can you just talk us through what your locations are, what they do, and then also tell us, how do people find you? How do people contact you, whether it's as a client, if they're in the east of England, or whether they want to actually come work for you? Because Troy's always hiring, guys. Yeah, give us the logistics.
So we're based in Leicestershire in a small village called Goby Marwood that's never heard of. People tend to drive past it because they say there's only one road in, one road out. We have the normal Facebook page, so newleaftriangle.co.uk. All the contact details are on there. So if anybody wants to get in contact, they can send us an email, they can give us a phone.
Right, New Leaf Triangle. So newleaftriangle.co.uk, not .org, because you're not a charity, right?
No, .org is our email address, not
okay.
We're not a charity.
And quickly, why did you decide not to be a charity? Why did you decide to be a regular business?
So the challenge of being a charity is you have to have a board.
Yeah.
Then the board at any stage could say, well, actually, I'm not happy with the way this is going.
Right.
And they could say,
kick you off.
We're going to kick us off.
Yeah.
Which would be quite embarrassing when we started it. So,
well, I've known that's happened to a few friends of mine.
Yeah.
You get these palace coups that happen in charities.
Yeah, we just didn't want to go down that avenue. So we didn't start that way.
Right. But when you were fundraising initially, was that not then difficult if you went to charity?
When we initially started with CIC.
Okay.
So that gave us a bit of an ability to do some fundraising.
Just again, not everyone's British here. So what's the CIC?
CIC is basically a community interest company, which is designed to benefit everybody in the local area or people in the local area to where you are.
So it's a for-profit, but you can raise money.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not profit. You've obviously raised enough money to pay your wages and to operate, but it does mean you could potentially go out and do some fundraising and
right. So it's almost like a hybrid between a regular company and charity. Okay. And then talk us about the locations that you've got. I know you're in Goby Marwood, the village that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
But why do you have 3 locations? What do these 3 locations do?
So our main site, which is our smallest site, is only about 2.5 acres, and it's got a menage in there, stables, and we have access to the woods behind. So it gives us quite a big environment. And we've just built a whole new classroom set there.
Okay.
The old buildings were starting to look a little bit run down. We self-funded as well. We built this massive 3-room classroom with an office on the end as well to give our operations manager a quiet space to go and work in.
Okay.
And we're on that site. We have pigs, goats, guinea pigs, rabbits, chickens, all that. It's like a little farmyard, really.
Okay.
And that's our primary site.
But also the horses there as well.
Some horses there.
Okay.
Those horses there tend to be used more for the pleasure side of things and for the experience. For the, we might go and paint them, or we might bring them out and just groom them. Some people might ride them. Then there's site 2, which is about 5 minutes walk down the road, 2 minutes in a car, and that's predominantly our horse side. So that's where we have more acreage. The menage is used more for traditional riding lessons to get people through their either a City and Guilds course or a Open Awards course. So it's much more structured in the way the outcomes are. So the students will go there. They tend to be a little bit older, and they tend to be looking towards getting some kind of vocational qualification.
Okay.
So they don't leave education with nothing.
And then your third location?
And our third site is it's about 10 miles away from where we are now. And that's where we have the most space. We've got about 50 acres there.
Okay.
It's all hillland, and our sort of ambition there is to make it more of a conservation kind of area. So we've planted a wood.
So rewild it a bit.
Yeah, a couple of years ago we planted a wood, which when woods never grow quickly, do they? It's like, no, please grow. It's not growing quick enough. And so we want to try and introduce lots of different species and that kind of thing over there. But it'll take a long time to get it done. We put a small barn there for the horses to go in the winter. Right. And all of our old retirees go over there and live their lives out there.
Okay. So you would serve different types of clients at these 3 different locations. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe. But sometimes actually we might say to some of the students who are working at site 1 that we're going to go to Dalby today, right, to go and do some care for the older horses. And it builds that kind of empathy. So you're going to go care for the horses who have retired. Yeah, they're going to take that as a life skill to go and care for other people that have, we're going to need to look after people that are retired and not just shove them off and stuff. They start to build an understanding of the world through doing things for others. Although the others are horses, it still gives them that inroad into it.
Yeah, I love the fact that you do these different environments. When we were working, particularly in Germany, I would often not meet clients at our location. Yeah, I would say this person really needs more forest time, and I'd say meet me in this car park, by the forest over there, and I would ride the horse over there, and we're going to do all our stuff in that forest today, and then you guys drive home, I'll ride my horse home. I love the fact that, and then nature would be involved in that, because inevitably wildlife you'd be into, trees you'd be into, plants and rocks and water. And I love the fact that you're bringing that side of things over into your third site. What are your plans for bringing that wilderness nature? Yeah, what's your vision for that?
So the next step there is we need some dry space, some indoor space, and some basic amenities to make it so that, because at the moment the students will go there to go for a visit, and it's almost like a rush. They've got to then get back. So what we're trying to do over the next couple of years is make it so they can go and stay there. Okay. And potentially they'll start from there as well. So we're putting up basing staff there. At the moment, the staff aren't based there. They drive there with the students. Right. So we'll end up with it being a base where staff will go and start their day and end their day. So it makes it a little bit more of a... And
are you doing nature education there that's sort of beyond horses? Are you doing, trees, woodland management, that sort of thing?
Yeah, because we had a group of students go over there and they helped us plant the trees.
Fantastic.
So they actually start to dig the holes and they try and get the lines and the levels and all that kind of stuff. And they get to drive a tractor, but don't tell anybody. Yeah. So they get involved in all sorts of stuff like that, which helps with their skills, and I had a digger for the day and they helped me help the digger a little bit. So
what I'm hoping that listeners and viewers get from this is that you should diversify.
You need to.
You should use the imagination, whether it's for dress up and silly, or whether it's for, well, could we not do something beyond horses? Or could we not have more than one campus? Or could one of our campuses be actually all about nature?
Yeah.
Or, I love this because this doesn't necessarily come naturally, I think, to a lot of people.
No.
I think,
So
I think people,
So our next sort of idea for diversifying is to probably look at how we expand this. So how we sort of franchise it,
okay.
make it open to other places. So we spent quite a lot of time building programs and things into our everyday offering. So it's how do we, rather than let somebody else reinvent this, how do we actually expand this into, I don't know, the north of the country, or to Scotland, or to, you know, Cornwall or something like that. So that people can just lift what we've done. It sounds dead easy, but it still needs to answer that human environment.
Well, I mean, you could argue that's what Horseboy has done, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
And what we went through this sort of question in the early days when it was pretty clear that it was going to grow.
Yeah.
And we thought, do we franchise? Because then you've got all this difficulty of controlling a product, and inevitably that's going to be beyond your control, particularly if you're doing it in multiple countries. Or do you just give people a toolbox and say, with this toolbox, do what you feel is right for your context? If you want to put, you know, our name on it, we do require that you go through an evaluation process and meet certain criteria, yes. But one of the things I love about Horseboy places is I know if I come to New Leaf, it's going to look different to my place, and that's going to look different to Joel Dunlap's place in California, and that's going to look different to Kitty and Henrik Berghoff's place in Germany, and it should, because that way each place is authentically has its own energy and charm, while making sure that a certain kind of neuroplasticity is guaranteed and a certain kind of horse welfare is guaranteed. But beyond that, I want people to be much more creative, and I don't want to stand in the way of that. You know, so as you begin to think in those terms, you know, yeah, what are your thoughts on how you expand New Leaf?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Because how you've done Horseboy and movement method and all those sort of things, it's, I mean, full credit, because you've let it grow, but you've not, sounds bad, you've not interfered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, sure.
You've not been on the phone going, well, I don't like the way you've done that. You need to change this because you're using, you know, and if you're quoting me, you've got to do this way. And
I mean, I'm not saying we've never had that situation, but very little. Yeah.
We've never, ever had that feeling from, you know, working with you guys.
No.
So it's always been a supportive thing. And that's something that I don't know how it's such a hard thing to do.
Well, I'd be really talking about support. I'd be really interested in helping you grow. Like, you know me, I'm not territorial.
No.
Well, you know, if you're doing Horseboy, if you want to create a New Leaf program, because I have absolute faith in what New Leaf does, I'm just honored to be a part of it. I find those types of collaborations really fulfilling because they're so creative. I'm just, so when you envisage it in your mind, let's say there were, you know, a dozen New Leafs through the UK, what would be the sort of underlying denominator factor that you would want? There'd be like these three things that you want to see or something like that. What would they be?
So the primary focus needs to be on the outcomes for the individual that come to the place, so that it's going to meet what they are there for, whether it's through just getting them on the right track with their mental health, or whether it's going to be educational outcomes, etc., etc. So the focus always needs to be on the outcomes for the individual. The second one is being true to that environment. So working within that environment, making the environment work for everybody. And, you know, especially around the human environment, which will probably be the hardest thing to lift and put in place, because that's we've learned the hard way. So we have had people that have been less adapted to what we do, you know, with the right intentions. People that tend to be more of a formal background, so teachers and stuff like that, tend to struggle a little bit more because they've been in the environment where it's all targets. So we've learned the hard way on how that human environment is such a challenge to create. And then I think the third one is to, I don't know, just keep it fun.
Yeah.
Because and then as I'm talking about this franchising and stuff like that, one of the things, it's almost like done, if you're not careful, for us, that goes full circle. And what we don't want to do is have Lorraine back in the car, going between little New Leaf sites all over the country doing her. It'd be like a bit of a, what? How did that happen?
Yes.
So that's really almost like a thing to avoid, isn't it?
And that doesn't sound like fun.
No. Yeah. So but out there are people that do enjoy doing that kind of stuff. So,
well, I love the fact that okay, so let's say fun is one of your 3 denominators.
Yeah.
Because we now know, fun is play is imagination is neuroplasticity is resilience, I'd be very, very interested in helping to develop that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's needed now more than ever as society gets more joyless.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, let's look to that future. And I think particularly those viewers and listeners who are thinking of starting a place, worried about making that leap, those of you who are in the UK and want the mentorship or a job, contact Troy. Once again, Troy, give us the contact details.
So it's newleaftriangle.co.uk is the website.
Newleaftriangle.co.uk.
UK. Yeah, so that's on there. And then all the phone numbers are on there.
Yeah, and they can email.
If you want a sensible conversation, talk to Lorraine. And if you want
to dress up as a pirate, talk to you.
To be honest, if without her credibility, without her tenacity and sort of enthusiasm, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are today. So all jokes aside, I'm allowed to do what I do because of the work that she's put in and the stuff.
100%, and much respect to her. That the fact that she met me in that context.
Yeah.
Thought actually this bloke's making sense.
Yeah.
Even though the other people in the room were completely rejecting what I was saying.
Yeah.
And then pulled you down to London that same night and said, we're doing this. I mean, the human quality that takes to just sort of say, this makes sense, gonna go for it. Not everyone has that courage. Yeah.
No, that's why it's worked so well, I think, because that, I'd have run out of steam personally years ago, but she's just kept us going and pushing and, always in the right direction, always on the right side of the legislation, always one step ahead. And, it must be exhausting. Well, all I've got to do is dress up.
Well, maybe you stop her from burning out by dressing up. So she can always roll her eyes. Oh, there goes Troy again. But
the amount of times the eyes get rolled at me, whether it's Lorraine or Tilly or the local village or whoever.
That's what we exist for, though, isn't it? Exactly. We are the people who give the other people the opportunity to roll their eyes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a service.
Is that indeed? Indeed. For which we should be paid, I think.
Exactly.
All right, my friend. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I look forward to the next conversation about how New Leaf is going to grow in the UK.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that next time.
And anybody who can help, more than happy to help.
Okay. And if anyone is in that East Midlands sector of the UK, these guys are doing sterling work with all manner of population. So get in touch with them.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine assisted field or are considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Takhin Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop. You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.